That's for people like Merrill Reese to get caught up in the emotion of the game. And here he is now, here with us here on the National Football Show. Merrill, I appreciate you coming aboard. Thank you so much.
Hi, Dan.
Merrill, define the 2022 season for you.
Well, for me, the season, it was a great season. It was a great season with an ending I didn't love.
Take me to the game, Merrill. I thought in the first half, the Eagles dominated that football game. They had them. Then in the second half, this is where I believe Andy Reid has gotten better. I think especially in situational play calling, they came out, they grabbed momentum, and they kind of went from there. They went on all their possessions and pretty much scored on every one of them. How did all that playing out for you? How did you see this game?
Well, I honestly thought, Dan, that it came down to two plays. The two plays were the scoop and score on the fumble, and I agree with you. Jalen Hurts was absolutely brilliant in this game. The scoop and score and the punt return.
And so special teams, Merrill, and it's one thing that you've been harping on all season long, especially when you were coming out of the Green Bay game. You were like this is going to rear its head somewhere, and it finally reared its head in the most important game of the year.
Yeah, it did. It did. I know a lot of people are upset about the call at the end, the holding call. I was not. I mean, it happened. It was holding. I mean, from a technical standpoint, it was holding. And I thought Bradbury showed a lot of poise and a lot of class in admitting that it was holding. He said he hoped that it wouldn't be called, and he had held earlier to a greater degree, but he didn't get away with it this time. And should they have called it at that time? I sometimes think there are things that you should let go, so that it doesn't become a game of flags. And we've seen that happen. There are calls that I hate. I hate that ineligible receiver downfield when it has nothing to do with the play. But in this case, it technically was holding, and you can't say you lost because of a call like that.
Merrill, I went back and looked at the 20.
I was just going to mention to you, and even if they didn't make that call, we don't know that the Eagles would have gone the length of the field to win the game. We don't know that. So that didn't lose the game.
No, Merrill, like you said, I agree with everything you said. I think but the technical term in the rule book, it's holding. But again, I mean, in a game like that, I mean, man, I know you want it to play out. You know what I'm saying? You want it to play out. You don't want to see something like that there. But again, I'm with you. I don't think that that's what lost the game. I think what lost them the game was their inability to stop the run. I mean, and them not being able to run the ball. To me, the most disappointing player in that football game had to be Miles Sanders.
Well, they did not have an effective running game. There's no doubt about that. But the fact of the matter is, if you didn't have those two plays, if you didn't have the scoop and score, and you didn't have them in position because of the punt return to win the game, to win the game, actually, they scored right after that, the Eagles would have won the game 35-24.
Merrill, Jalen Hurts, I said this, I go, if you look at what they did in the 2021 game, it's funny. Hurts threw for 358 yards in that game, or maybe 378 in that game, and Mahomes threw for 227 in that game, or 277, and then he turns around and he does a throw for a ton of yards in this ball game. He was 90% completion percentage, but the two factors that were the same is that, Merrill, they ran the ball for 180 yards combined in both those games as an average. I mean, they kind of know the game plan and how to beat them. They believed that the Eagle defensive front was not going to stop the run. They, in theory, beat them with the 2021 game plan, but without Tyreek Hill.
No, you're right. You are absolutely right. And you often say to win, you have to be able to run the football and stop the run.
Absolutely. Andy Reid, how did you feel about – you know what? Probably when you were in Glendale, you hated it. But after a couple days now, how do you feel about Andy Reid winning a second Super Bowl?
I,
Are
I'm
you are you a little
I,
bit torn?
well, you know how I feel about the Eagles losing this Super Bowl because it's bitter, but they played it was a great football game. I think the thing I said on the air to our audience, not to be a homer, but to our audience, I said I will remember this as a great Super Bowl, which was won by the wrong team
Yeah.
from an Eagles standpoint. But the Chiefs deserved it. They did the things, they made the adjustments that they had to make. I can't take anything away from them. I can't take anything away from the running of Pacheco. He really turned the corner. He really showed something on the ground. And then they got some stuff from McKinnon. And they had those two breakdowns, defensive breakdowns, that led to touchdowns by there were two of them. One to Sky Moore, and the other to Ladarius Toney.
Merrill, I thought in the second half, this is why the defense got a little confused. Because in the second half, it looks like Andy did a lot of crossing routes, and the corners and safeties were passing off wideouts, and it confused them. And that's why some of those Kansas City wide receivers were so wide open, is that they did a ton of those crossing routes. I even heard Eric Bieniemy talking about how we kind of confused them a little bit because they were trying to pass them around. It just goes to show you, Andy's improved as a play caller. Now, 15 helps. There's no question he's a transcendent player. But I thought his play calling, especially his clock management too, that's where a key where I had a problem with him in Philadelphia was that I didn't really think he was that hot of a clock management guy. But I think that's gotten better with him.
Oh, it has. It has. But keep in mind, you're talking about a coach with 24 years of experience against a coach with 2 years of experience. But yet, take nothing away from Nick Sirianni. He is a great young coach.
What coordinator do you feel will be felt the most in the loss, Shane Steichen or Jonathan Gannon?
I think they're two excellent coaches. I think that the Colts in taking Steichen made a great move, and I think that the Cardinals in taking JG made a great move. They're both excellent young coaches who will be successful if, and I know this is a big if they get organizational support. These have not been traditionally two great organizations in supporting their head coaches. But they have, if they get that, they can both be winners. Now, I think it may be easier for the Eagles to replace Shane Steichen because don't forget, Nick Sirianni was a former offensive coordinator, so it's his side of the ball than to replace Jonathan Gannon. But we'll see what they do. But I think on offense, I would not be surprised if they promote Brian Johnson, who has the whole history with Jalen Hurts, has known him since he was a little kid, and was also an offensive coordinator at Florida before he came to the Eagles as a quarterback coach. So he and Jalen are on the same plane. They're on the same page all the time.
Do you have a little concern that Brian Johnson could follow Jonathan Gannon to Arizona? Because, again, there's the same kind of situation there with Kyler Murray in the RPO system. And if you named him assistant head coach and promoted him to OC, that's an elevation on – it's not a lateral move. Would you be concerned? Because I agree with you. I think Brian Johnson – and I wouldn't be surprised too, Merrill, if Denard Wilson ends up becoming the defensive coordinator, because I would think Howie would want to keep everything in-house.
Well, I have no inside knowledge on this, but I would think that probably Nick Sirianni has an agreement with Jonathan Gannon not to take certain pieces. And I think one of those would be Brian Johnson.
Instead of rating, because, again, like you said, most of the time when you get these opportunities like this, you end up rating some of it. And that's good to hear because, again, you got to get permission from the Eagles to talk to these guys. Right. So they gave them the permission. I threw an interesting name out. If they don't want to elevate, I threw out Eric Bieniemy, and this is why I threw out Eric Bieniemy. The RPO system's intact. Jalen's pretty much your offensive coordinator on the RPOs. Eric Bieniemy's never going to get an NFL head coaching job working for Andy Reid. That's evident. It's not going to happen. He's interviewing with the Commanders, I think, this week. And Andy has given him the opportunity to see if he wants. Would you be open to something like that? Because the evolution of Jalen Hurts' passing game, and all of a sudden you bring Bieniemy in that was working with Patrick Mahomes. Do you think that's something that the organization would entertain, or do you think it's mostly in-house, Merrill?
I think it's mostly in-house. I really believe it's going to be Brian Johnson.
How about this offseason here with free agency? Are you concerned that there's a ton of moves to be made? There's only 4 guys, Merrill, on the defensive side that are under contract. This team may come back and look completely different next year, especially if they address Jalen Hurts' contract.
Which they will. There's no doubt. I mean, Jeffrey Lurie indicated that they will. So he did that Super Bowl week. He said, we're going to take care of it, not this week, but it will be done soon. So that is something they will take care of. And he'll be getting top quarterback money. But I think they will lose key. They've got a lot of decisions to make. Do they let Miles Sanders leave? Do they? I don't think they can sign both James Bradbury and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They have to decide which one of those guys they keep. I don't. Another one is Javon Hargrave, who's coming off a great season. See, they've got to make choices. They can't sign all these guys. Siamalo, T.J. Edwards, who had a terrific season, terrific linebacker. So they've got a lot of decisions to make.
Finally here, Merrill, from what I understand, like you said, the week of the bye, Clutch Sports, and I want to get the wording right because Clutch told me to make sure the wording's right. Clutch and the Eagles are working on a framework for Jalen Hurts, and the range is between $45 and $50 million. Now, I don't have any more insight. I don't know if it's front-end, back-ended. I don't know with guarantees. I don't know anything. But Clutch is saying that it's more about framework, and that's why when the owner came out, Jeffrey Lurie came out and said, money's not the issue here. It's the framework that they're working on. That's where they are right now. So, to me, it looks like Jalen wants to work with Howie and the front office on making sure that there's a roster coming back next year.
Sure, absolutely. Well, there will be a roster coming back next year. They'll be a strong team entering the season. They have a few spots that they're going to have to fill. But let's look, for example, I'm going to name 2 players who will fill spots. One is Jordan Davis. He had a good rookie season. He missed some times with a concussion, and he had a high ankle sprain for a while. But Jordan Davis is going to be an impact player next year. So maybe that if they lose Hassan Reddick, he just becomes that guy in the defensive interior. Another guy who is waiting in the wings for an opportunity to play every down, and that is Nakobe Dean. They like him a lot. Jonathan Gannon told me great things about Nakobe Dean, and they loved him when they drafted him. So I think he will be an impact player next year. As I said, this team has some depth.
Absolutely. Merrill, it's been a great ride. I mean, of all the losses, I'm thinking, boy, I'll tell you, you've been around for every one of them, just about. The last game at the Vet, 81 Super Bowl, the Patriots Super Bowl, maybe even the New Orleans loss when Jeffries dropped the ball in New Orleans. That was a tough one.
Oh, yeah.
And this one right here, I mean, I think probably because the expectations were on this team that this one probably hurts the most.
No. The one that hurts the most, I've thought about this.
It's McNabb.
It was the play at the NFC Championship against Tampa Bay. in the last game ever played at Veterans Stadium. The Eagles were decisive favorites going into that game, and everybody had the Super Bowl in their view. Everybody felt, let's get this out of the way. Tampa Bay's not going to win on a cold day and move on to the Super Bowl, and it never happened. That was the bitterest of all. Leaving that stadium that day was the toughest. This time it hurt. I cannot say that it didn't, but I also thought this team won 16 games. This team accomplished everything went right. They went through this season, Dan, and had all 23 starters healthy for the Super Bowl. That's remarkable. They picked up a lot of people who are going to help long range. They picked up a return guy, a punt return guy in Britton Covey, who had a 28-yard return during this game and averaged 9 yards per return during the season, which was higher than Darren Sproles and Danny Amendola averaged in their first year in the NFL. There are a lot of players that I could look at this team on this team and say, you know what, they are going to even get better in some areas. Now I know things happen. This will be another team. They will be a target from day one. The schedule will be tougher. Who knows about injuries? There are changes on the staff. There are changes on the field. So it'll be a different team. But they have three things going for them above all else. Number one, they have an excellent, and I do mean excellent, organization from the top on down. They have an owner who is reasonable, who lets his people do their jobs. Number two, he supports them in every way. Number two, they have a general manager who has proven that he knows what he's doing. He uses his staff, his talent evaluators. He makes great moves. Look what he did this year. And number three, and this is really, really tough to find, and there are teams that haven't been able to do it for years, they have an elite young quarterback. Those three things give me confidence.
You know, Merrill, I want to leave you with this one here, and I pointed this out earlier. Think about it. So that organization, when it comes to hiring coaches, even Chip Kelly, who's turned UCLA around, had a winning record in Philly. Doug won a Super Bowl and won a division. Andy's going to the Hall of Fame. Andy Wall up in Pittsburgh is the assistant general manager. Joe Douglas with the Jets. Andrew Berry with Cleveland. There's one thing this organization could do. Now you got Gannon, Frank Reich, and Shane Steichen, all with NFL head coaching jobs. There's one thing that Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman does. They hire quality people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they do. This is an excellent coaching staff. There's no doubt about it. They have in my 46 years doing the play-by-play, they have the best offensive line coach I've ever been around. Jeff Stoutland is amazing. His players revere him. Jordan Mailata, when he gives us college, says he went to Stoutland University. He's the best. To have an offensive line coach that good is a big, big plus. And their defensive line coach, Tracy Rocker, you know the kind of player he was, College Hall of Fame.
Former teammate of mine.
Really?
Yeah. He was a former teammate of mine. And, when we were in the World League together, because Tracy got hurt with the Washington Redskins and he blew his knee out, I was the property of the Detroit Lions. We played in NFL Europe, and he was the defensive tackle, and we played for 2 years together. And then he went into the college ranks. I think he went to Auburn, then he went to South Carolina, then he went to Georgia.
Yeah.
And then he came to, as a matter of fact, the defensive line coach at Pittsburgh, Carl Dunbar, was our teammate as well. We were all three on that same defensive line. He went to LSU. Tracy went to Auburn, won the Outland and Lombardi, actually. And I went to the University of Miami. So we were all teammates.
Great guy, isn't he?
Great guy, knows his stuff. I believe he's one of the top flight defensive line coaches in the NFL. Merrill, I'm going to let you go.
Okay.
Thank you for everything this year. Can't wait to talk as we get into free agency and the draft.
Let's do it.
You got it. Thank you, Merrill.
Okay, take care.
the legendary Merrill Reese, has been there for all the great wins and the heart-wrenching losses. Hit the like button. Keep it here on the National.